Okay, in history, we've started our chapter that's on the Revolutionary War. And right now we're still learning about the things that led up to it, what was happening beforehand. So we read about the French and Indian War. We read about the Boston Massacre. Today we're going to read about another thing that happened in Boston called the Boston Tea Party. Now, the way that the colonists were feeling as these things were happening weren't all the same. Not everyone felt the same about what was happening. It was a very interesting and confusing time. Okay, so we're going to read a little bit about that today. Our textbook pages are 161 to 163. Okay, now as a part of their culture at that time, many colonists drank tea every day. It was part of like a culture thing that happened every afternoon. Tea was served. There might be cookies and jelly and sandwiches, and it was a cultural thing that was very important to them. Okay, and all the tea came from England, okay? But remember, in America, and between America and Great Britain, there was a lot of hard feelings and people were trying to figure out how they felt about it. Okay, well, after the Boston Massacre, many people were really angry, but then for a little bit, things quieted down. The British government decided to do away with most of those taxes that the people had been so frustrated about. But the tax on tea stayed the same. 3 years after the Boston Massacre, England shipped 2,000 chests of tea to the colonies. More than 300 tea chests came to Boston, and the colonists loved to drink tea, but they did not want to pay the tax. If they paid it, they would be agreeing that the tax was fair and right, and many believed that it was not fair. In Boston, the citizen asked their governor to send the tea back to England, but he would not do it, and some of the colonists formed a plan. Late one night, men and boys from Boston met at the harbor. They wore blankets and carried axes. They smeared paint and soot on their faces to disguise who they were and to look like Indians, Native Americans. The men boarded the British ships that held the chests of tea. With their axes, they broke open each chest and dumped the tea in the ocean. They hoped the king would now understand how the colonists felt about the tax. So this is a big deal. They're angry, but also it's a big deal because the tea was worth a lot of money and now it's gone. It's ruined. So they're making a protest and saying, we don't like that tax, we don't think it's fair, and we won't pay for your tea. News of this tea party quickly spread throughout the 13 colonies, and colonists began taking sides. Some of them wanted to stay true or loyal to the king and to Great Britain. Okay, so they were called loyalists. Others wanted to throw off British rule. They were even ready to fight for their freedom if they had to, and they were called patriots. The British were not happy about the Boston Tea Party. They made a new law. It closed the port of Boston. No ships could come in or go out. The British also took away some of the colonists' rights. Citizens of Massachusetts could no longer choose their leaders, and they could not hold any more town meetings. Okay, so that was the response of England to their protest about the tea. It's interesting to think about now. We're so many years later, when we hear the story, maybe we're just comfortable with it and we just think, yeah, patriots, yay, America. But it's interesting to think about. People really would have had very different feelings. You might still have a lot of family in Great Britain and feel like, oh yeah, I'm British and I have a king. While other people felt like, no, I'm in a new place. I don't feel like I belong to Great Britain. I'm not a subject of that king. We have a new colony that we've started, a new place. Now, the colonists had been governing themselves since they had landed. They wrote the Mayflower Compact in 1620. Let's look at that to remind ourselves when we first read about that. Let's see, it's page 93 if you also want to look at it. On the Mayflower Compact, they signed an agreement and they said, as colonists come to this new world, we will need laws in this new world, and we will make just laws. So ever since those colonists had signed that first, had made that agreement and had signed it, that's how things had worked. The colonists who landed had made their own laws. And so when the British government said, we're taking away that, you can't make your own rules, you can't have town meetings, and they also closed the harbor. Why do you think that was a big deal? We've talked a lot about one of the things that they did in the colonies was ships could come in and bring goods, and ships could also go out and take goods to other places. So that closed off one of their main sources of transportation, and also ways that a lot of people made their living. Okay, so I wonder if you can imagine how the different people felt, how some people felt like loyalists. They felt like, I feel like I'm still a British person. I just live in this colony of Great Britain, and I want to be loyal to the king. While other people felt like, no, we're in a new world, we're doing a new thing. And you know what else they felt like is that they didn't get any say in the rules that were being made. And they felt like, well, if taxes are going to be made, or different rules are going to be made, they wanted to have some say, like they were represented among the government in Great Britain. And so far, Great Britain had said, no, you don't get any representation. You're just a colony. You do what we say. So that's kind of where things had landed. I think it's interesting for us to consider the different ways that the colonists felt. We've already talked about in the colonists, people had come from so many different places in the world. It's not surprising that they had different feelings when it came to this, right? So now we're to a kind of an exciting point in the history. I would like you to, let me make sure we read this all the way to the end. Yes, we read it all the way to the end together. You might want to look at it yourself. I would like you on your own piece of paper to write down these two definitions and turn that in for me, please. All right, let's look at our Bible verse. Now, this is our theme verse of the whole school year. So you're familiar with it. We had it on our bulletin board with the butterflies all around it, and we had it on our bulletin board with all of the snowflakes that you made. And I want to end the school year learning it again. All right. So it's a longer verse, so we'll probably do it for more than just 1 week. We'll work on this together. I want to read it to you. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Okay, so I love this verse. I love thinking of, let's work on it again, memorizing it at the end of the year because of the truths in here. We've been learning a lot about Jesus, how he sacrificed himself for us, how he's so powerful and he does miracles, and how he's also a good example and he invites us to follow him. Okay, so this verse that says we are God's workmanship, it's about you are also really special. God made you and he wants you to belong to him. He wants you to be in Christ Jesus. Do you remember our verse from last week? That anyone who's in Christ is a new creation. So whoever belongs to him, he has such good plans for you. So it says created in Christ Jesus for good works which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. We can think about that Jesus is a good example. He invites us to follow him, and God has good plans for your life. All right. So I'm excited to think of what that means. You knowing God better and following him more closely, and what good plans God has for your life, and what good works he has for you to do. And this week we're going to be learning some about the disciples who Jesus called to follow him in the Bible. We have a worksheet in your one worksheet for you to do about those disciples, what Jesus says to them when he asks them to come follow him. Okay? Jesus began his public ministry of preaching. Do you remember he had gotten baptized? John the Baptist baptized him, and everyone heard the voice of God saying, "This is my son. I'm so pleased with him." Okay? So then Jesus begins his public ministries, telling people everywhere who will listen that to come follow God, to turn away from their sins and follow God. As Jesus walked along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw some men fishing from a boat with a net. The men would throw the net into the water, let it sink to the bottom. When they pulled it back up, it would have fish in it. Jesus said to these men, they were two brothers named Simon and Andrew, "Follow me. I will make you fishers of men." These men already knew what Jesus was doing, and they had already accepted him as the Messiah, and they were ready to follow him as disciples. As soon as they heard these words, the brothers brought their fishing boat to shore. They left their nets to follow Jesus, and they began learning from him. As Jesus, Andrew, and Simon, who was later changed his name to Peter, continued to walk along the shore of the lake, they came to two other brothers. These men were mending their fishing nets with their father Zebedee. James and John also knew Jesus, and they too had accepted him as the Messiah. When Jesus called them, they left their nets and their father's business, and they followed Jesus. They too became fishers of men. The four men walked with Jesus into the town of Capernaum. One day, sometime later, Jesus had healed a man who was paralyzed, and he was back at the lakeside teaching his disciples and the people who were following him. There, Levi sat by a tent, waited for caravans to come by so that he could collect their tax money. So this man is a tax collector. When Jesus said, "Follow me," Levi, who was later called Matthew, got up, he left his tax collecting job, and he went with Jesus. Jesus now had 5 followers. Later, Jesus met and called Philip, who was from the town of Bethsaida, where Andrew and Peter also lived. Philip went to Nathanael, who was also called Bartholomew. People had more than one name sometimes. And he said, "We have found him, Jesus." When Nathanael saw Jesus, he too believed Jesus to be the Messiah, and he wanted to follow him. Philip and Nathanael became the 6th and 7th disciples. The rest of the disciples were Thomas, James, Thaddeus, Simon, and Judas Iscariot. So Jesus goes and finds people, and he asks them, "Come follow me." He has a new way for them to live and new things for them to do. And these men, many of the men that he was calling in this part of the Bible story were fishermen. And he says, "I'm going to give you a new job. I want you to be fishers of men." What do you think that means? That's an interesting phrase. I think it means he wanted these men to leave just trying to fish to make money and have that be their job, and he wanted them to be like Jesus and care about finding as many people as they could and telling them about God and his love and inviting them to follow and be a part of that plan. So he invited them, and you know what? These people, these men who believed in what Jesus was saying, they were willing to walk away from things that were very important to them. And that's an important thing about following Jesus, is we're willing to follow him and make sacrifices because he's our example. He teaches us how to do that, how to be brave and loving and care about others more than we care about ourselves, right? So that's our Bible story for today. Your worksheet is page 190, and this is the Bible verse that we'll be working on. Okay, for our new spelling list this week, we're on list 28. And when you look at your list 28, we're going to do page 110 is your assignment today. Page 110. When you look at your spelling words, I think you're going to notice something that we've worked on before, okay? The suffix ER may be added to a base word when comparing two things. The suffix EST may be added when comparing more than two things. Now, we've used this. We were using this when we were doing adjectives and using adjectives to compare. So here are some of our spelling words that we're going to add onto, okay? So clean is a spelling word, but then we're also going to write cleanest, okay? And then we have fast, but our spelling list also includes faster, right? How about flat? Well, flat, if we want to use it as a comparing word, can become, hold on. Well, flatter, more flat. And you notice when you make it flatter and add the ER, you also double that T, okay? Hot can become hotter. So this does the same thing, doesn't it? Late can become latest. Nice, nicest. Thin can become thinnest, and we double that in. And wide can become wider, right? So those are our pattern words. Those are the pattern spelling words. They're different versions of a base word, that's the word with no suffix, and then adding a suffix. They don't all add the same. Some add an EST, some add an ER. But these words are familiar to us because we worked with adjectives like this when we were comparing, using adjectives that compare. Our review words will be tries and puppies from last week. And then our memory words are somewhere, something, compound words, okay? Somewhere and something. So I'd like you to do page 110. This is a word sort. This is the back side of the last spelling page you did last week. So I hope you just left it in your spelling book so that you don't have to look around for it, that it's just right there. If you've lost it, you just need to write down your spelling words in a list and show them to me. It would be good if you copied them like this, because this is the word sort itself, where you're putting them together, the words that compare the base word and the word with its suffix. Let's work on some math. Remember, we've introduced the concepts of fractions. That's what we've been working on. We started on Friday. So today we'll just be doing more with that, more with fractions. Okay, a fraction is when something is separated into equal parts. So this rectangle is one whole rectangle, where this rectangle is separated into two equal parts. So that 2 gives it its name. This is 1/2 and 1/2, okay? So in a fraction, however many equal parts it's broken into goes on the bottom of the number. Okay, how about this? Rectangle is divided into 1, 2, 3 equal parts. So the 3 goes here in each fraction, and this is thirds. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. This one is divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, which is where the fraction will get its name. 4 equal parts. This one's divided into fourths. All right? So let's look at your worksheet, page 249 to 250. If you get that out and have it in your hands, we'll work some of the problems together to give you an idea of what you're going to be doing. Number 1 has a picture of a fraction, one rectangle divided into 3 equal parts, and then 1/3 is shaded. So you're going to go down here, they give you some examples, and you're going to circle which one is the right name of the fraction. This is 1/4, 1/3, 1/2. And we know it must be this one, 1/3, 1/3, because this is broken up into 3 equal parts, and only one of them is shaded. Okay? Number 2 is the same type of question. We have a rectangle broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. So the fraction we'll be looking for will have a 4 on the bottom. And look, 2 of these have a 4 on the bottom. But how many equal parts are shaded? 1, 2. So our fraction that we'll circle is 2/4. Now, number 7 is another way they're asking you to practice your fractions. And we have something broken up and it tells you 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But they want you to write your own fraction. How many are shaded? 2. And how many equal parts? 3. So you're shading 2/3, or you're writing 2/3, which is what is shown in this picture. Okay? Number 8, they want you to do the shading. So it's a little bit hard to show on a wipe-off board, but They are giving you a shape divided into its equal parts and then giving you a fraction. They want you to do the shading. So we see it's fourths and they want you to shade 3/4. So we'll shade 1, 2, 3. And that's coloring in the fraction 3/4. So this whole worksheet just gives you more examples and more opportunities to work with fractions and become familiar with how to color them in yourself, how to write them yourself, how to identify what you're seeing, and you're going to do a great job.